I was on Webtoons the other day and saw a lot of new releases and thought I would binge read a couple. To start with, Born to be the Grand Duchess, the female lead found herself reincarnated inside of a novel. Unfortunately, she was reincarnated not as the main lead of the story, but instead as the villainous Annette Phrase. In the novel, Annette is the illegitimate daughter of the Phrase family. She is often seen bullying the female lead until she meets her demise and gets executed. But our new reincarnated Annette is determined to change her fate. Annette's father is furious that the Grand Duke Loic is only sending a small amount of money to pay for the marriage. Not only are they given pennies to fund the marriage, but the Grand Duke himself would not be present for the wedding itself. The Grand Duke plans on sending a stand-in to attend his own wedding. But Annette, desperate to leave the household, persuades her father to let this marriage happen even if it costs them their pride. You're probably wondering why the Grand Duke hates Annette and her family to the point where he won't even show up to his own wedding. Well, during the war, the North was attacked by demonic beasts. They asked Annette's family for help, but they declined, causing Loic's dad to make a blood pact with the dragon and sacrificing himself to protect his land, causing the current Grand Duke Loic to despise Annette and her family. On the day of their wedding, we finally see why Annette wants to leave the household in the first place. She's ignored by maids, looked down on by everyone, and is seen getting her hair ripped out in disguise of her hair being combed. When it comes time for the actual wedding ceremony, Loic doesn't even show up. Instead, his aide arrives in his place. The plan was to exchange vows and quietly abandon Annette at the altar. Unfortunately for them, Annette is smarter than that. She immediately picks up on what's happening, finds the assistant, grabs her things, and gets ready to go. As she's preparing to leave, Annette receives a gift from her brother, Ferdin. Ferdin is known for despising Annette and treating her terribly, so she's completely confused on why she was given an expensive box filled with luxurious jewelry. And inside the box, it's a note that says, "If you ever need help, contact Lady Arson." Though she's still confused by his actions, Annette can't help but feel a sense of comfort, knowing that she has someone by her side. Once she arrived in the north, Loic refused to meet with her, telling his aide to send her back immediately. But Annette, pretty determined to meet Grand Duke, basically goes door to door in hope of finding him. Loic then sees her from afar and basically says that she's avoiding her for her sake. But then we get a flashback of young Loic, and he is seen looking at his hand and trembling as he stands over a dead body. Loic refuses to see her because he doesn't want Annette to realize what a terrible man she's married to. Look, man, it doesn't hurt to see her just once. It's actually such a trashy move to ignore her days upon days. One thing that irks me about webtoon stories is how characters cannot have conversations for the life of them. So many things can be resolved if they just speak to each other. But Annette is pretty upset that Loic is avoiding her. She herself doesn't want this marriage either. She's doing this so she can divorce him after a year and stay alive. And as Annette is sipping her tea outside in the garden, Loic is peeping through his window looking at Annette, and then has a badum moment where he gets all red and blushy, and then compares her to a freshly hatched chicken. That night, Annette comes up with the plan to finally corner Loic and meet with him. She uses the excuse of bringing him tea to gain access to his chamber. When she arrives, she finds him stepping out of a bath in his robe, leaving both Annette and Loic completely stunned. Annette loses her balance and she starts to fall backwards until Loic grabs her and they end up like this. But Loic immediately pulls away. Annette then remembers that Loic is cursed. During the war, a demon needed a safe vessel to hold its mana, thus proposing a blood pact with Loic's father. His father then had a mana core implanted inside of him, but the dragon's power consumed him, causing his death, which now the curse has been passed down to Loic. And there are only two ways to calm down the rage of the dragon within the body. First is to exhaust the body's energy regularly, like hunting down beasts, or by having physical contact with the woman that is capable of sharing the dragon's mana. But there's only one person that possesses such a gift, which is a saintess named Constantine. Any other woman suffers in agony at the slightest touch and can even die. The only question I have is, how did Annette forget this curse, which is a very important detail? She seems to know everything about the story, even being a few steps ahead of every character, but totally forgets that Loic is cursed and how she shouldn't touch him at all costs. She is seen as a very important character, character, so it's really odd to see her miss or forget such a crucial detail. But Annette definitely touched him and she is completely fine, which means that Loic's mana was able to flow into her and she's compatible in sharing the dragon's mana. And we don't know why she's able to just yet, since there's only 10 chapters out, but I bet her reincarnation must have changed the story, where she's a saintess instead of the other person named Constantine, thus allowing her to bear the dragon's mana. The next webtoon is the Grand Duke Bride is a warrior from hell, and I can't lie, I'm a pretty big fan of this webtoon thus far. Alicia was the first daughter to be born into the family in 200 years. Alicia was a legitimate child. She often stuttered and stumbled over her words, and was afraid of people, which caused her to hide at all times. She was born a girl, the first girl born in 200 years. She was spared. Despite being illegitimate, any other illegitimate child would have been put to death without question. Why was she allowed to live despite all of this? Well, she could be of use to the family by marrying her off to the highest bidder. As soon as she turned 17, she was married off to Gregory, who comes from a very influential house. However, Gregory was caught cheating, leading to the divorce between Alicia and Gregory. The divorce legal battle dragged on for 8 years. By the time it finally ended, Alicia was 25, already considered past her prime age for marriage. Since she had no use to the family as a divorcee, her family was quick to find another willing suitor that would marry her, which we find out is Grand Duke Tessin. Tessin is known as the serial killer of Grand Duchesses. He received that name because there already been 6 Grand Duchesses before Alicia, and they all have died. Each of their death was ruled in accidents, like poisoning, sudden falls from staircases, and tragic carriage accidents. But Alicia knew what marrying Tessin meant. It meant that her fate was already decided and she was going to die. And her father knew all of this, yet still allowed it to happen. But Alicia, powerless, cannot fight back and allows her to get married off once again. Alicia then goes back to her room, where she received a box full of jewelry. Among the jewelry, she finds a pocket watch. She opens the pocket watch and gets transported where she's seen getting ripped apart by monsters, marking her death on January 1st. Or so we thought. Alicia finds herself in hell, where she's surrounded by monsters. No matter how many times she's torn apart by monsters, she comes right back to life, almost as if she's become immortal. No matter how many times she tries to run, the monster always catches her and rips her apart yet again. She's gone through this cycle hundreds of times, and just when she's about to lose all hope, she realizes something. She can fight back. Using bones, she forges a weapon, which I thought was pretty cool, and starts slaughtering the monsters instead. At this point, she's basically leveling herself up. She even gets a pretty cool scar across her face and a fantastic bob haircut. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of Solo Leveling when Sun Jin Woo is trapped in the dungeon and grinding his way up. For a moment, I genuinely forgot this was supposed to be a romance webtoon. But right after she defeats one of the bosses, a blinding light flashes and she's suddenly transported back to her room. Completely confused, Alicia realizes that she's much younger. Then it hits her. She traveled back in time to when she was 17, to the time before she was married off to Gregory, the man who cheated on her in her first life. As if that wasn't bad enough, she's back to her frail, weak body of hers prior to all of that training. Imagine surviving an entire training arc, dying over and over again, only to wake up and lose all of your progress. Alicia then wakes up to her stepmom. At first, I thought this was going to be the typical trope where the stepmom hates the legitimate child, but here we see that the mom actually cares for Alicia, where Alicia even calls her mother, which she has never done before, even in her past life. The reason that Alicia never called her mother was because Alicia felt guilty. Her very existence is the living symbol of her father's infidelity. Thus, the lady of the house should hate her. But after returning to the past, Alicia realized that her stepmom genuinely loves her, and she regretted not showing her love back. Alicia wants to change her fate. The first step is stopping her marriage to Gregory, which she asks her mother for help. I really thought the story had a great start. I'm actually really upset that there's only 4 chapters out, so this is something I will be patiently waiting for when there's new updates. The Possessive Tyrant and his sleepy cat starts off with the female lead getting hit by a truck while trying to save a cat and getting transmitted into a novel. She doesn't get reincarnated as the female lead of the story, not as the villainess of the story, not as the mom of the main lead. So what does she get reincarnated as? Well, she gets reincarnated as a cat. This is actually my first time seeing something as ridiculous as this. Webtoon actually never ceases to amaze me with their stories. However, the cats are not loved in this fantasy world. Actually, there's a prophecy saying that cats will bring the empire to its demise. that this big fear to many citizens causes them to go through the entire empire and wiping out every cat that they come across. For centuries, there hasn't been a cat in sight. The only thing that comes to my mind is that this prophecy has to be made by someone that hates cats. This prophecy doesn't look like divine foresight. It looks like this prophecy was created due to personal vendetta. Our female lead, that is a cat, gets randomly picked up by the male lead of the story, Killian. Killian, fascinated by the cat, decides to pocket her and take her home. The female lead is quite surprised since everyone in the kingdom, especially the crown prince, is conditioned to hate cats and are supposed to kill them on sight. We quickly learn that Killian's life isn't as it seems. He was called to meet with the emperor, where he was getting harshly disciplined, to the point where he gets all bloody. The reason for the lashings were never stated, but it's something that happens quite often ever since Killian's childhood. The female lead realizes that Killian isn't just a character she read in the novel. He's a real person with scars that was never just a plot device. Then, Killian, ready to go to bed, decides to sleep with his cat. As he falls asleep, he realizes that there's no longer a cat beside him, but a very naked woman. Killian couldn't believe his eyes, gets up, waking up the female lead, who is no longer a human but back to her cat form. It seems that the female lead turns into her human form when she sleeps and back to her cat form when she's awake. And at this point, the female lead has no idea that this is happening. Killian begins to realize that everything he was taught from a young age was a lie. The empire still stands even though there's a cat sitting right in front of him. No collapse, no divine punishment, nothing he was warned about. Slowly it dawns on him that history itself has deceived him, and now he's determined to uncover every hidden truth that the empire has buried. Starting with his prophecy of cats, and until then his property, aka this cat, would not be taken away from him, and he plans on keeping it hidden until then. But what I'm really confused about is why Killian isn't more alarmed. Why isn't he freaking out more? Like, I would lose my mind if my cat randomly turns into a human. Honestly, this story is pretty lighthearted and funny. I probably will follow up with it as they release more episodes. The final webtoon that I will be reading today is The Grand Duke Is Mine. Ignat was arranged to marry the Grand Duke Heinz, but Heinz was sent to the front lines for the conquest of the Black Forest. Due to this, a wedding never happened, but at this point they are married on paper, but they just never met each other. Ignat has been desperately waiting for this marriage in order to get away from her family that always looked down on her. When she gets married, she can finally be loved, which is something she never experienced before. Heinz wasn't just her husband-to-be, he was her only hope, her only escape. One day, Ignat is summoned to her father's office, where he tells her that she'll be divorcing Heinz and marrying someone else he's already chosen for her. When she asks why, he says that Heinz has stopped sending her monthly allowance, an allowance that she didn't even know existed. Money her father has been pocketing behind her back the entire time. He says that he's been requesting money from him because she's a married woman, and her father, is no longer financially responsible for her. I'm sorry, but she didn't ask to be born, and now she's supposed to pay the price for decisions she never made. I hate when parents treat their children like property or a business transaction, acting like basic care is a favor instead of the bare minimum that they owe. But flash forward, she marries her new husband, and this guy got in trouble with the king where he needs to run away. But before running away, he needs to get rid of some baggage. This said baggage being his wife, Ignat. He tells her to drink something, which she agrees to, and she gets poisoned and dies. But right before she dies, she catches a glimpse of Grand Duke Heinz. Then she closes her eyes and is pronounced dead. But when she opens her eyes once again, she's confused because she knew she died. However, she soon realized and is grateful that she was given a second life. She's returned to the past, to the moment just before her marriage to Grand Duke Heinz, the very event that marked the beginning of her downfall. This time, she refuses to let history repeat itself. She will change her fate no matter the cost. Her first step is simple yet crucial. She will attend the wedding because in her previous life, she never made it to the ceremony, a mistake that will set everything else in motion. Ignat believes she knows exactly what to expect under the pretense that Grand Duke Heinz will not attend the wedding himself. She assumes he will once again send a proxy to stand in for him, just as he did before. In other words, the groom will be absent, or so she thinks. Heinz does attend the wedding. Not only that, he personally walks down Ignat down the aisle. The vows are exchanged arranged, the ceremony is completed, and just like that, they are officially married. Ignat is convinced that the man beside her is merely a stand-in, a proxy sent to represent the Grand Duke in his absence. In reality, she unknowingly walked down the aisle with her actual husband, Heinz himself. But what I don't understand is why he didn't disclose his identity to her. And this is where the story immediately kicks off with some good old-fashioned miscommunication between the main couple. We learn that Heinz possesses a talking sword that allows him to read other people's mind. However, Heinz and the sword are confused when they realize that they cannot read Ignat's mind at all. And that's pretty much what happened in the first 4 chapters. I don't want to judge this webtoon too quickly because it seems like it has potential. Although the story starts off like every other webtoon, I think it can be great. It will be interesting to see how Ignat tries to get revenge against her family, all while trying to learn what love is from her husband Heinz.